My name is Elena Whitaker. I'm 34 years old. And I didn't know my relationship was already over until my boyfriend said something so casually cruel that it stripped 2 years of love down to a single insult. It was just after 1 a.m. I remember the time because I'd been staring at the glowing numbers on my laptop screen, trying to push through a client deadline that refused to cooperate. The apartment was quiet except for the low hum of my computer fan and the distant city noise drifting in through the window. I heard the door open, then close. Then the uneven footsteps I'd learned to recognize, too slow, slightly off rhythm. He'd been drinking. He dropped his keys into the bowl by the door with a little too much force and sighed like the night had exhausted him. I turned in my chair. "Hey," I said. He didn't smile. Instead, he sat down heavily on the couch, elbows on his knees, staring at the floor like he was bracing himself. "We need to talk," he said. That should have been my first warning. We'd been together 2 years. Long enough to recognize when a conversation had already been rehearsed somewhere else. "Okay," I said, closing my laptop. "What's going on?" He hesitated, just long enough to make the words sharper when they finally came out. "My friends think you're just dead weight." The sentence landed wrong. Not loud, not dramatic, just heavy. I blinked. "Excuse me?" He rubbed his face. "They think you're holding me back, that I'm the one carrying the relationship." Carrying me. I felt something cold and steady settle in my chest. "How exactly am I being carried?" I asked. "You know," he said vaguely. "I have the stable job. I plan things. I'm the one with direction." I stood up slowly. "Is that what you think?" I asked. "Or what they think?" He didn't look at me when he answered. "Does it matter?" That was the moment everything clarified. His friends had always been loud, confident, competitive in a way that made every dinner feel like a resume comparison. They worked corporate jobs, climbed visible ladders, measured success in titles and LinkedIn updates. I freelance. Design, consulting, strategy. Some months are quiet. Some months are incredible. I've always loved the freedom and the responsibility of building something on my own. They never did. The comments started small. "Must be nice to work whenever you want. Wish I could just wear jeans to work." Always wrapped in laughter. Always just deniable enough. And slowly, he started laughing too. That night, I finally heard what had been said between the lines for months. "If I'm dead weight," I said calmly, "then don't carry me." He looked up startled. "What?" "Problem solved," I continued. "You don't need to fight for anything." "You're not even going to argue?" he asked. "Argue for what?" I said. "Your friends already convinced you I'm not enough, and you agreed with them." "That's not fair." "It's accurate." I walked into the bedroom and pulled out a bag. He followed, panic creeping into his voice. "Where are you going?" "A hotel. Then I'll figure something out." "You're seriously leaving over one conversation?" I zipped the bag and finally looked at him. "This wasn't one conversation. This was months of you letting people chip away at my worth while you stayed silent." He started crying then, saying he didn't mean it like that, saying we should talk more. I picked up my bag. "Tell your friends they won," I said, and I walked out. The hotel room smelled like bleach and stale air freshener, the kind they spray too heavily to convince you it's clean. It didn't work. I dropped my bag by the bed, sat on the edge of the mattress, and just stared. For the first 10 minutes, I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I didn't even shake. I felt strangely empty, like my body had decided it couldn't afford emotion until it understood whether I'd just saved my life or destroyed it. My phone buzzed almost immediately. Him. I didn't answer. It buzzed again. And again. By the fourth call, I turned the phone face down, like I could smother the noise with sheer willpower. I lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. And that's when my brain did what it always does when I'm hurt. Rewind everything until I can find the moment it started. Because the dead weight comment didn't come out of nowhere. It was the conclusion of a conversation he'd already had with someone else. A verdict he'd already accepted. I thought about all the dinners where his friends would turn the table into a stage, everyone performing adulthood, everyone competing to be the most impressive. And me, sitting there quietly, trying not to take up too much space. At first, I'd tolerated it, not because I liked it, but because I liked him. I liked the version of him I met at that networking event 2 years ago. He'd seemed different then, warm, thoughtful, grounded. He worked corporate sales, always sharp, always on. But with me, he'd been softer. Like he could finally breathe. Or maybe I imagined that. Maybe I saw what I wanted to see. Because the truth was, his friends were always around. The tight college circle that never evolved past the age where friendship meant control and loyalty meant obedience. They had rules about everything. Where to eat, how to dress, what success should look like, and who deserved to be in the room. And slowly, I started noticing the way they looked at me. Not with curiosity, with evaluation. Like I was a risk. Like I was a temporary phase he'd grow out of. I'd brush it off at first. Freelance isn't a concept everyone respects until they need it. I'd explain my work casually, mention clients, talk about projects like they mattered. They'd smile, nod, and then one of them would slip in a comment like a blade tucked inside a joke. Must be nice not having to answer to a boss. Or, is your income stable now, or is it still, random? Always with that laugh after, that soft laugh that said, don't be sensitive, we're just teasing. And my boyfriend would laugh too, not loudly. Just enough to show he didn't want to stand apart from them. That was the part that should have scared me sooner. Because I'd been in rooms where people didn't understand me before. But I'd never been in a relationship where the person who claimed to love me let the room decide my value. I barely slept. Every time I started to drift, my mind yanked me awake with one sentence, one expression, one memory. Dead weight, like I was something to drag. Something heavy, useless, inconvenient. By morning, my body felt like it had been wrung out. I got up, showered, and stared at myself in the mirror with red eyes and damp hair, trying to decide if I'd made a mistake. Because there's a specific kind of panic that comes after you leave. Not during. After. When the adrenaline fades and you're left alone with the question, what if I overreacted? I sat on the bed and forced myself to be honest. If this had been one drunken sentence, one clumsy comment, then maybe I could have talked it through. But it wasn't one sentence. It was 6 months of small humiliations. 6 months of him watching people disrespect me and choosing silence over defense. 6 months of me shrinking myself so I wouldn't be too much in a room that was never mine. So no, I didn't overreact. I just reacted late. I checked out of the hotel before noon and drove to a co-working space I sometimes use downtown. Not because I had the energy to work, but because I didn't trust myself alone. I booked a desk, opened my laptop, and pretended to focus. Around 2:00 p.m., my phone buzzed again. A text. Him. Please, can we talk face to face? I didn't mean it like that. I was drunk. I was stressed. I'm sorry. I stared at the screen for a long time. Then I typed, me. Not sure what there is to talk about. He called immediately. This time I answered. Thank you, he said, like I'd just rescued him. His voice sounded raw, hoarse. I've been freaking out. You should be, I replied. Elena, I didn't mean it. I was upset about work. I took it out on you. My friends were talking and I just... Stop, I said, my voice calm but sharp. Which part didn't you mean? Silence. The dead weight part? I continued. Or the part where your friends think I'm not good enough? Or the part where you agreed with them? I didn't agree, he started quickly. You did, I cut in. You said it. You didn't say, my friends are being cruel. You didn't say, they don't understand you. You said it like it was truth you'd been holding back. He swallowed. I was venting, he said. For 6 months, I asked. What? Your friends have been making comments about me for 6 months, I said. My words steady, surgical. You've laughed. You've joined in. You've let it happen. I didn't realize. You realized, I said quietly. You just didn't care enough to stop it. He went silent again. Then, softer, I know I should have defended you more. More. Like it was a minor mistake. Like it was forgetting to pick up milk. I closed my eyes. I appreciate your apology, I said. But it doesn't change the fact you let them convince you I'm inadequate. They didn't convince me, he said quickly. They just kept saying it, and I started wondering if they were right. That sentence was worse than dead weight, because that one admitted something deeper. He'd looked at me through their eyes, compared me to their standards, and questioned my worth. How long did you wonder? I asked. He didn't answer. I let the silence stretch until it became its own confession. That's what I thought, I said. Elena, he whispered, voice breaking. I love you. And I almost laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was tragic. Love wasn't the issue. Respect was. I hope you find someone who meets their standards, I said softly. I'm done trying to audition for your life. Then I hung up. That night, I found a month-to-month sublet, a small furnished studio downtown. Functional, temporary, exactly what I needed. 4 walls and silence that belonged to me. By Wednesday, I started moving my things out while he was at work. Not everything. Just the pieces that felt like mine. Clothes, laptop, sketchbooks. My grandmother's necklace he once called cute in that dismissive way people use when they don't understand something has history. Each trip felt like peeling a layer off a version of myself that had been trying too hard to fit. On my last trip, I left my key on the kitchen counter, right beside the bowl where his keys always sat, and I didn't leave a note, because the note had already been spoken. Then don't carry me. And I meant it. The first week after I moved out felt unreal, like I was living inside a delayed echo of my own life. My body went through the motions automatically. Wake up, shower, work, eat something that barely registered as food, sleep in short, broken stretches. Emotion came in waves instead of a steady stream. Sometimes I felt calm, almost relieved. Other times, I'd be hit with a sudden ache, so sharp it felt like grief had snuck up behind me and wrapped both hands around my ribs. But one thing surprised me. I didn't miss him the way I thought I would. I missed the version of us that existed before his friends became a permanent presence in our relationship. Before I started bracing myself at dinner tables. Before I learned to translate jokes into insults. Before I felt like I needed to justify my existence. Work helped. I threw myself into it with a focus that felt almost feral. When your self-worth has been quietly eroded, productivity becomes a form of defiance. By the end of the week, I'd landed one solid new client. Nothing earth-shattering, but enough to remind me that my career hadn't been imaginary, just because someone else didn't respect it. His texts kept coming. Longer now. More desperate. Paragraphs layered with regret, explanation, self-pity, promises to do better. I read them, everyone, and then I set the phone down without replying. Because something had shifted. I wasn't angry anymore. I was clear. About 10 days after I moved out, my phone lit up with a number I didn't recognize. I almost ignored it. Almost. But curiosity is a stubborn thing. Hello? There was a pause on the other end. Then, hi, this is Rachel from college, one of his friends. My shoulders tensed instantly. What do you want? I asked, not bothering to soften my tone. I wanted to talk to you, she said carefully, if that's okay. I thought about hanging up, but something in her voice, less polished, less performative than I remembered, made me stay. I'm listening. She exhaled, like she'd been holding her breath. I wanted to apologize, she said, and explain something, because I think you deserve to know what happened after you left. I leaned back against the wall of my studio, phone pressed to my ear. Go on. That night, she said slowly, after you walked out, he came back to the party. I closed my eyes. He told everyone what happened, she continued. That you'd left, that you were upset. He was shaken. I stayed silent. At first we were supportive, so, she said. People said you'd cool off, that you'd come back, that it was just a fight. And then her voice dropped. Then Lauren said something. Lauren, the ringleader, the one who always smiled too wide and asked questions like they were traps. What did she say? I asked. She laughed, Rachel said, and said, well, now you can finally date someone worth your time. My stomach tightened. She said it like it was a good thing, Rachel continued. Like you leaving was an opportunity, like you were disposable. I swallowed. And? I asked. Rachel hesitated. He froze, she said quietly, like completely shut down. I pictured it too easily. The way his face went blank when something finally hit deeper than expected. She repeated it, Rachel went on. Started talking about ambition, about how he could do better, about how you were holding him back. And, I prompted again, my voice barely above a whisper now. He looked at her, Rachel said, and he said very quietly, I just lost someone I love because I listened to you. The room around me felt suddenly too small. Rachel continued, no one said anything after that. It was uncomfortable, silent. And then he left, just walked out. I pressed my forehead against the wall. I followed him, she said. We talked in the parking lot. He broke down. Said he'd been letting us poison him against you for months. That every time we made a comment, he defended you less and questioned you more. I closed my eyes fully now. Why are you telling me this? I asked. Because I was part of it, she said immediately. Because we were wrong, all of us. She paused. We judged you for not fitting our idea of success, for not performing ambition the way we expect people to. And we pressured him until he broke something real. He's an adult, I said. He made his own choices. I know, she replied. I'm not trying to excuse him. I wanted you to know he regrets it. Deeply. Regret. It was a strange word. Heavy. But also useless. I appreciate the apology, I said, but it doesn't change anything. I know, Rachel said softly. I just thought you should know the truth. She hesitated again. And I looked you up after all this, she added. Your portfolio, your client list. It's impressive. You're not dead weight at all. You're just not conventional. And we couldn't see past that. I let out a slow breath. Thank you, I said, for telling me. I hope you're doing okay, she said. I will be, I replied. After we hung up, I sat on the floor for a long time. I didn't feel triumphant. I didn't feel vindicated. I felt sad Sad that something good had been dismantled by voices that didn't belong inside our relationship. Sad that he'd trusted them more than his own experience. But also, quietly, relieved. Because clarity, even when it hurts, is better than doubt that lingers. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. Work took off. Not magically, but steadily. I landed 2 major projects back to back. One contract alone was worth more than 3 months of my usual income. Funny how that works. Funny how much energy you have when you're not spending it trying to prove your worth to someone who's already decided you're lacking. His messages slowed, then stopped. And for the first time since I'd left, I felt like I could breathe without waiting for the next emotional blow. The silence wasn't empty anymore. It was peaceful. And that was when I realized something important. Walking away hadn't broken me. It had freed me. The email invitation sat in my inbox for 2 full days before I opened it. Panel speaker confirmation. Emerging voices in creative strategy. I stared at the subject line like it belonged to someone else. Me, a panel? 6 months ago, I would have second-guessed every reason I didn't belong there. Now I forwarded it to my mentor with a simple, "I'm in." The event was small, industry-focused, well-respected, the kind that actually mattered if you cared about the work more than the optics. The day of the conference, I dressed without overthinking. Black trousers, soft gray blazer, hair pulled back. No costume, no apology. The panel went better than I expected. I spoke about non-linear careers, about creative independence, about building value outside rigid systems. People listened. They nodded. They took notes. When it ended, a few attendees came up to introduce themselves, exchange cards, talk projects. I was mid-conversation when I felt it. That shift in the room. The kind you don't see, you sense. I looked up, and there he was, standing near one of the sponsor booths, watching me. For a split second, instinct told me to leave. Slip out the side door, protect the peace. But I didn't. I stayed. He hesitated, then started walking toward me. "Elena," he said when he reached me. "Hey," I replied. "I didn't know you'd be here," he said. "I was invited." He nodded. "You were really good on the panel." "Thanks." Silence stretched between us. Thick, awkward, familiar. He looked different. Thinner. Tired. Like someone who'd been carrying something heavy for too long. "How have you been?" he asked. "Busy," I said. "Work's been good." A flicker crossed his face, something between relief and regret. "I'm glad," he said. "You deserve that." We stood there while people moved around us, the low buzz of conversation filling the spaces we couldn't. "I've been wanting to talk to you," he said finally. "I know," I replied. "I've been avoiding it." He nodded again. "Yeah." He took a breath. "Could we get coffee? Somewhere quieter?" I considered it. Saying no would have been easier. But curiosity and closure have a way of pulling you forward. "There's a cafe across the street," I said. We walked out together. The cafe was small and nearly empty. We ordered drinks neither of us really wanted and sat in a corner booth. "I'm sorry," he said almost immediately. "I know I've said it before, but I need to say it again. I was wrong. About everything." I wrapped my hands around my cup. "Okay," I said. "What do you want me to do with that?" He flinched slightly. "I don't expect forgiveness," he said. "I just wanted you to know, I see it now, how much I messed up." "You told me I was dead weight," I said calmly. "You let your friends tear me down. You made me feel like I wasn't enough." "I know," he whispered, "and I hate myself for it." I looked at him steadily. "I looked happy today," I said. "Did you notice?" He nodded. "Yeah." "That's because I am," I continued. "Or at least I'm getting there. I'm not walking on eggshells anymore. I'm not wondering if I'm impressive enough." "I'm glad," he said softly. "So am I." He hesitated. "I've been distancing myself from my friends." "Good," I said. "They were toxic." "They were," he agreed. "Or at least that dynamic was. I don't know if those friendships can survive what I've learned." "That's your work to do," I said gently. We talked for another hour about what went wrong, about what we could have done differently, and eventually about what we both already knew. There was no path forward. Too much damage, too much resentment, too much clarity. When we stood to leave, he looked at me with something like acceptance. "I hope you find someone who sees you the way you deserve to be seen," he said. "I hope you learn to see yourself clearly," I replied, "without needing a crowd to tell you who you are." We hugged, brief, awkward, final. And then we went our separate ways. As I walked back toward the conference center, I felt lighter. Not because we'd fixed anything, but because we'd finally let it end. Some relationships don't need closure in the form of reconciliation. They need closure in the form of truth. And that day, I walked away knowing exactly why I left and why I never needed to go back. 3 months passed quietly after that coffee. Quietly in the way real healing happens. Not dramatic, not loud, not punctuated by grand realizations, but steady, incremental, earned. Work flourished in a way that felt almost unfair. I raised my rates. I turned down clients who drained me. I hired an assistant to handle admin so my brain could stay where it worked best. Things I'd been too hesitant to do before, too worried about looking unstable or ungrateful, now felt obvious. Turns out when you're not constantly defending your choices, you have energy to actually excel at them. I heard through mutual acquaintances that he'd been promoted. Good for him. Genuinely. I also heard he'd started therapy, that he was finally unpacking why his friend's approval had mattered more than his own instincts. I hoped it helped, and I meant that. I started dating again. Nothing serious at first. Coffee, conversations, low expectations. Then, about 2 months after the conference, I met Daniel. He's a photographer. We met at a gallery opening, stood too close to the same abstract piece, and laughed about how neither of us understood it, but both pretended we did. He gets freelance life, the feast or famine income, the freedom and the anxiety, the pride in building something that doesn't fit a template. He never once asked when I was going to settle into something more stable. He asked what I was working on, what excited me. Last week, he met some of my friends. Afterward, one of them pulled me aside and said, "He lights up when he talks about your work." It hit me harder than I expected, because my ex never lit up when he talked about what I did. He tolerated it, explained it, softened it for others, but he never celebrated it. That was the difference. 6 months after I left that apartment, I moved into a better one. 1 bedroom, real light, space that felt intentional. My assistant became a business partner. We started talking about office space. Momentum builds fast when it isn't fighting resistance. I heard my ex was dating someone new, someone from his company. Same corporate structure he once said he needed. I felt nothing. No jealousy, no regret. Just the quiet acknowledgement that we were both moving forward, separately, as we should have been all along. 9 months after the breakup, I got an email from him. Subject line, no response needed. It was long. He wrote about therapy, about people-pleasing, about how he'd never developed a sense of self outside his friend group. He apologized again. Then he wrote something that stayed with me. "You were right when you said I wanted someone who matched my energy. I just defined energy too narrowly. I couldn't see that you had everything I valued, just in a different form." I read it twice. Felt sad for him more than angry. That's a hard lesson to learn. I didn't reply. He'd asked me not to, and because I didn't need to. A year has passed now. The relationship feels distant, like something that happened to a younger version of me. Daniel and I moved in together last month. It's easy in a way my previous relationship never was. We respect each other's work, support each other's goals, don't let outside voices dictate our internal reality. I ran into my ex one last time at a professional event downtown. We saw each other across the room. He waved. I waved back. That was it. No conversation, no reopening wounds, just acknowledgement. And then we moved on. Looking back, I realized the relationship didn't die the night he called me dead weight. It was dying every time he laughed at a joke made at my expense. Every time he compared my flexibility to his rigidity and found mine lacking. Every time he introduced me with an apology in his tone, the comment just made it undeniable. "Then don't carry me" was the best thing I ever said in that relationship. It took the power away from him and his friends and gave it back to me. I wasn't fighting for us that night. I was fighting for me, for my dignity, for my right to be enough as I was, for a future where I didn't have to audition for respect. Sometimes the fastest way to lose someone is to let them think they've already won. And sometimes the strongest move you can make is to walk away with your head up and let them sit with what they lost.